A boy walks up a street in Philadelphia. It is a Sunday morning in October 1723. He is 17, filthy, exhausted, half asleep on his feet. He has just rode through the night and walked 50 miles through rain to get here. He owns nothing but the clothes on his back, a few spare shirts stuffed in his pockets, and about $1. He is so hungry he buys the only thing he can afford, 3 enormous bread rolls, and with no bag to carry them, tucks one under each arm and eats the third as he walks, looking, by his own later admission, utterly ridiculous. A young woman standing in a doorway watches him pass, and she laughs. Remember that image. The runaway. The last dollar? The girl laughing at a boy who looks like nothing at all. Because in less than 70 years, that same boy will be standing in rooms with kings. His face will be printed on currency. He will drag electricity out of a thunderstorm with his bare hands. He will help write the founding document of a nation. And the girl laughing at him in that doorway, she will become his wife. His name is Benjamin Franklin. And this is the story of how a runaway apprentice with almost no formal education became one of the most consequential people of his century. Franklin is born in Boston in January 1706. The 15th child in a family so large it feels like a small institution. His father makes candles and soap, and with 15 children to feed, there is little money beyond survival. Franklin's schooling ends at 10. From then on, his classroom is a candle shop, cutting wicks and stirring vats of hot animal fat. He despises it. What he does not despise is reading. Every coin that comes into his hands becomes a book. He even gives up eating meat, partly because it is cheaper, redirecting the savings into more books. At 12, he is bound as an apprentice to his older brother James, a printer. It is hard, ink-stained labor, but for a boy starving for words, a print shop is close to paradise. And here Franklin does something remarkable. With no teacher, he invents his own method of self-education. He reads essays he admires, sets them aside, and days later tries to reconstruct them from memory. Then he compares his version against the original, line by line, hunting for every place his writing falls short. Nobody taught this boy how to write. He built the teacher himself, out of persistence and a stack of borrowed pages. By 16, that homemade education has paid off. His writing is sharp and genuinely skilled. But his brother James will never print anything written by his little brother. So Franklin invents someone else. Late at night, he writes letters in the voice of an imaginary middle-aged widow he names Silence Dogood, sliding them anonymously under the print shop's door. James and his friends publish the letters, praise them, and spend weeks guessing which brilliant gentleman must be writing them. 14 letters go out before Franklin finally confesses. His brother is furious, and the punishment that follows only gets worse. So at 17, Franklin makes a decision both dangerous and illegal for the time. He breaks his apprenticeship contract and runs. Boston to New York to Philadelphia, by boat and on foot, through storm and rain, until that Sunday morning when a dirty boy walks up Market Street with bread rolls tucked under his arms, and Deborah Reed laughs at him from a doorway. What follows is one of the great rises in American history. The runaway finds work in a Philadelphia print shop and outworks everyone around him. By 22, he owns his own printing business, printing currency, government documents, and eventually his own newspaper, soon the most widely read publication in the colonies. He marries Deborah, the girl from the doorway, and at 26, he creates the project that makes him famous, a yearly almanac published under a fictional persona he calls Poor Richard. An almanac, in colonial America, is a small annual booklet of calendar dates and weather predictions that nearly every household buys. Franklin fills its margins with short, funny lines about money and human nature. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. lines repeated for nearly 3 centuries by people who have no idea they are quoting a printer's pen name. Poor Richard's almanac sells roughly 10,000 copies a year and makes Franklin genuinely wealthy. And here is where Franklin becomes something far more interesting than simply rich. He looks at the chaotic city around him and starts fixing it, piece by piece, for the rest of his life. Young men want books they cannot afford, so he organizes America's first lending library. Houses keep burning down, so he founds the city's first volunteer fire brigade and a fire insurance company. He helps establish a scientific society, a hospital for the poor, and an academy that grows into a university. One man, almost entirely on his own initiative, rebuilds the infrastructure of a city. At 42, wealthy enough to never work again, Franklin retires and turns to the greatest unsolved mystery of his era, electricity. At the time, it is treated as a dinner party trick, sparks meant to amuse guests. Nobody understands what it actually is. Franklin studies it with obsessive rigor, and within a few years, this man with 2 years of schooling is inventing the vocabulary science still uses today. Words like battery, conductor, positive and negative charge. He does not just study electricity. He names it. Then comes the moment that turns him into legend. Franklin suspects that lightning in the sky and the small sparks in his laboratory are the exact same force. In June 1752, during a thunderstorm, he flies a silk kite into the clouds with his son beside him, a metal key hanging from the wet string. When he brings his knuckle close to that key, a spark leaps across the gap. Small, sharp, undeniable. In that single spark, centuries of superstition about lightning collapse into pure physics. It is genuinely dangerous. The next year, a scientist in Russia attempting a similar experiment is killed by a direct strike. Franklin survives and converts his discovery into protection for others. The lightning rod, a simple pointed bar that redirects a strike safely into the ground. Churches and city blocks stop burning down because of it. Here is a detail that reveals exactly who Franklin is. He never patents the lightning rod, his famously efficient stove, or virtually any invention. His reasoning is simple. Since he has benefited from others' inventions, he should be glad to share his own, freely. The same boy who once owned nothing but 3 bread rolls and $1 gives his ideas away for free for the rest of his life. But history is not finished with Franklin, and what comes next is far more painful than any lightning strike. He spends years in London representing the American colonies as tensions with Britain escalate over taxation. Franklin genuinely wants reconciliation, not rebellion. Then, in January 1774, inside a crowded government chamber, he is publicly humiliated for an hour by the king's lawyer, mocked before a laughing audience. Franklin, 68 and among the most respected scientists alive, says nothing. He simply absorbs it. Historians have said it since. He walked into that room a loyal Englishman and walked out an American. 2 years later, at 70, Franklin sits on the small committee assigned to draft the Declaration of Independence, sharpening young Thomas Jefferson's language with the eye of an old editor. As the delegates sign a document that could get them all executed for treason, Franklin reportedly jokes that they must all hang together, or they will most assuredly hang separately. The new nation then hands its oldest founder its hardest assignment. America cannot win its war alone. It needs France. So Franklin, at 70, crosses a winter Atlantic and conquers Paris, not with an army, but with charm. He wears a simple fur cap instead of a powdered wig, and French society falls for the folksy philosopher from the wilderness. Behind the charm, he negotiates the alliance that secures French money, ships, and soldiers, the support that wins the war. He later helps negotiate peace with Britain itself. At 81, he is the oldest delegate at the convention that writes the Constitution, a calm voice of compromise among proud men. As the final signatures are gathered, he looks at a half-sun painted on the president's chair and remarks that he now knows it is a rising sun. But part of this story cannot be skipped. Earlier in life, Franklin owned slaves. The same man who wrote so much about liberty also held human beings in bondage. That contradiction is real. What matters just as much is what he does next. He becomes president of one of America's first anti-slavery organizations, and one of his final acts is signing a petition to Congress demanding abolition. He knows it will likely fail. He sends it anyway. Benjamin Franklin dies in Philadelphia in April 1790 at 84. 20,000 people attend his funeral, in a city of barely 30,000. The runaway with 3 bread rolls and a single dollar becomes, by nearly every measure, the first true citizen of a nation that did not exist when he was born. So here is the question worth sitting with. A boy with almost no education builds himself into a scientist, a diplomat, and a founder of a nation, using nothing but curiosity and stubbornness. What would you attempt if you believed you had that kind of time to build yourself from nothing? Tell us in the comments, which part surprised you most? The runaway apprentice, the man who caught lightning, or the founder who stood silent under an hour of humiliation?